So in this video, we're going to dig into the Style Palette so you're able to use it effectively and save time later on in the animation process. So we already know about setting a fill and stroke color. Let's select a shape with the Select Shape tool. By the way, to make it easier to see your styles, make sure Checked Selection is unchecked. That toggles between the checkered selection and this red outline selection. With the shape selected, we can change our selected stroke and fill colors, or uncheck these to get rid of them entirely. Another option for picking colors that we haven't looked at yet is the Swatches palette down here. Using the drop-down, you can set this to display one of these preset examples of a color palette. If you left-click within the palette, it will set the fill color, and if you right-click, it will set the stroke color. Now, all this color palette really is an image file. If you look at some of these other options, you can see a variety of ways you might use the color palette to easily get at the colors you want to use for a scene. Some of these are just photos, and some are photos that have been pixelated, while others are background illustrations for a scene. And take a look at face.png. This is basically the model sheet for a character design with the colors called out to make them easy to select. This is a great way to make use of concept art and character model sheets to make it really easy to use the right color for the right part of the character. To add your own image, just select Custom Image from the bottom and browse to your image file and open it. If you have images you know you're going to want to use as palettes frequently, go to File, open Custom Content folder, and then in the folder called Swatches, you can drop whatever images you want, and they'll appear by default in the Swatches dropdown. In addition to colors, we can also apply a brush style to the stroke if we want. These brushes are just a small PNG image file that you can see here, and then the settings down here determine how the brush lays down the image. Down here you can see a preview of what the brush will look like as you change your settings. If you want additional brushes, you can buy packs from the Smith Micro website, or if you want to make your own custom brush, you just need a starting image as a PNG file with a transparent background. Go to File, Custom Content folder, and find the Vector Brushes folder, and add your PNG file there. Then when you start Moho, that image will appear in your brushes palette. Once you've got the brush tip in, you then need to set the settings down here for how it's going to lay down a stroke using that tip. And there are a couple ways to save these settings. If you look at the other brushes here, there's a naming scheme that will automatically set the settings when it brings in the PNG. You can just rename your file with the settings you want and restart Moho. Or if you want a less technical way, you can just set your settings to what you want and then click Save Brush down here. Give it the name you want, and it'll save it to the same custom content folder. Then also go ahead and reload the brushes. If you look in the custom content folder, you'll see that it saves a new copy of the original PNG and this .moho brush file. The next feature of the Style Palette we haven't looked at yet is this Effects dropdown. These are special effects you can apply to a shape as part of its style. So for example, let's try Shaded Effect. This gives us a bunch of settings and controls that lets us automatically put a shadow on our shape. If you ever need to change the settings for a style you've applied, press this button. Now, some of these effects won't be visible on the stage. You need to do a render with Command or Control R to see what they will actually end up looking like. For example, the soft edge effect, which feathers the edges of a shape's fill. We'll need to turn off the stroke for this one. So you can't see it on the stage, but if we render the image, you can see how soft the edge really is. Next, there's the gradient effect. This is how you would apply a color gradient to a fill. You can select and delete one of the color squares to simplify your gradient, or click on the strip to add an additional square, and then you click inside these squares and use the color picker to define the colors that are on your gradient. and choose the type of gradient up here. Then it gives you this tool to position the gradient within the shape. Note that this gradient overrides whatever the color of your fill is. If we go back in the settings and enable Allow Transparency and bring down the opacity of one of the colors, then it's just going to make the shape transparent. The last one here I think you might find useful is Image Texture Effect. This lets you browse for an image file and use that in place of a fill color. Now this image is tileable, so I'll leave the fill mode on tile. You can then use these controls to position and size the image texture. Also, if you use a source image that has transparency, like this PNG, by default it will show it over top of the shape's fill color. But you can also enable through transparency, and then it will hide the fill color of the shape and only show the image texture. Now you might be wondering if there's a way to apply more than one effect. There is, but we'll look at that in just a second. So let's say you figured out a style for one shape and you want to apply it to others. Well, the first thing to point out is that these buttons down here give you the ability to copy and paste a style from one shape to another. So if we have the style we want in a shape, we just make sure we're using the Select Shape tool to select it, then hit Copy. Then if we select a different shape, we can hit Paste and we'll have the same style. We can also hit Reset here to go back to the default style settings. So copying and pasting is nice, but there's a much more powerful way to save and apply styles. First, let's enable Advanced Mode with this checkbox. This gives you some nice extra features right away. For example, you now have the option to apply two effects at the same time to your fills. You can also apply effects to the stroke too. And you can enable or disable the round caps that automatically get added to strokes that you draw. But the real power of Advanced Mode is being able to save and reuse styles. Let's look at a demo of how and why you would want to do that. So here we have a basic face that's made up of a bunch of different shapes. The first thing I'm going to do is name these shapes. If you have a shape selected with the Select Shape tool, you'll have the option in the Styles palette to give it a name. It will then appear on the Shapes drop-down. This is just an easy way to select a shape without having to switch to the Select Shape tool and click on it. I'm just going to go through and name all the pieces of this face. Now, next to the Shape drop-down is the Styles drop-down. Here we can save a style. First, let's create a style for the hair. The hair is in separate parts, but we'll just work with one for now. I'm going to set the fill color, stroke color, width, and give the stroke a brush texture. Then I will come to the Styles drop-down and select New, and then give that style a name. So now that style is saved as an option in the Styles drop-down. Now the next part can be easy to miss. If I select the shape, if you look down here on the Style 1 drop-down, you see this is where that style is actually applied. So if I select the rest of the hair shapes, I can then set their Style 1 setting to the style for the hair. Now the nice thing about having the style applied in this way, as opposed to copy and pasted, is if I go up to the Styles drop-down and open the style for the hair, I can change these settings and they change on every shape the style is applied to. Also note that there are checkboxes next to the different settings. These tell the style to override the original shape settings. So say if you wanted the shapes to keep their original stroke width, we could uncheck this box. Then if there's a shape with a different stroke width, it will keep it, but have the other settings from the style applied. Now the reason shapes have a Style 1 and a Style 2 is because you will frequently want to make your fill settings and stroke settings separately. For example, I'll set up a style for the fill color of the skin here, and I just want it to include the fill, so I'll uncheck everything else. Then I'll make another style for the stroke color. Then for a case like the mouth, I can still give it the skin color for the strokes and make the interior color whatever I want. So that's it for the style palette for now. Next, we're going to look at one final way you can work with color in Moho, and that's making gradients using color points. We'll do that in the next video. I'll see you there.